No one truly understands why some people cling so tightly to solitude, unless they've lost everything. In the remote wilderness of western Montana, where civilization ends and raw nature takes over, lived a man named John Whitmore. A retired forest ranger, he had spent the last decade in self-imposed exile, hidden deep in the snow-covered mountains. His only companions were the whispering winds and the groan of old trees. John wasn't born a loner. Years ago, a single pair of headlights on a rainy road had taken his wife from him. From that moment on, words felt empty, and cities became unbearable. He built a cabin far from everyone, and every morning, he watched the same view: frozen trees, a rotting fence, and an endless hush. But one morning, everything changed. Outside his door, buried in a snowbank, was a motionless shape, barely breathing, half frozen, and staring at him with eyes that didn't beg for help, but instead asked to be understood. John didn't speak. He didn't need to. He scooped the dog into his arms and carried it inside. That was the moment their story began. There was something in the dog's eyes. Something heavy. He wasn't just lost, he was running from something, maybe everything. John named him Shadow, not just because of his dark coat, but because he followed John like a quiet echo. A ghost. A reflection. A companion too careful to be noticed, but always there. A shadow didn't bark, didn't whine. At night, he trembled in his sleep. He ate like he was still fighting for scraps. He didn't trust humans. And honestly, John understood, because they were the same. John spoke little, but Shadow didn't need words. They sat together in silence, the crackling fire their only soundtrack. Each was healing the other without even knowing it. Then one winter night, something happened. A pack of coyotes howled in the distance. Shadow tensed. His ears perked. But instead of growling or running, he looked at John, then quietly rested his head on the old man's knee. It was in that moment, without a single word, that an unbreakable bond was formed. Not between man and dog, but between two survivors, both shaped by pain. As spring approached and the snow began to melt, John's body began to fail. His hands shook. He paused more often to catch his breath. He felt sharp, unfamiliar pains in his chest. But he ignored them, because pain was something he'd learned to live with. Shadow, however, noticed everything. He watched John's every movement, analyzing the change in his breathing, the tremble in his steps. He had become more than a companion, he was now a guardian. Then came the day everything almost ended. John stepped outside just to grab some firewood. 5 minutes, he told himself. But the heart doesn't listen to reason. Halfway through, it gave out. John collapsed into the snow, his body twisting in pain. Cold air filled his lungs as the sky began to fade into white. There was no one around. No one to help. No one, except Shadow. From inside the cabin, the dog suddenly became frantic. He howled, clawed at the door, and threw himself against the glass. And then, he jumped through the window and vanished into the snow. He ran, fast and focused, leaving behind a trail of paw prints heading straight for the village, 3 kilometers away. A snowplow driver noticed the dog's erratic behavior and decided to follow him. Shadow led him deep into the woods. And there, barely alive in a bed of snow, they found John. The doctors later said he had no chance. Not unless help came in under 10 minutes. It arrived in 7. Carried by 4 legs and a silent promise. John survived. But he was never quite the same. He walked with a cane. He moved slowly. He spoke less than ever. But now, he was never alone. Because Shadow was always there, beside him, beneath him, behind him. In the hospital, Shadow refused to leave the entrance. Nurses brought him blankets. Townsfolk brought him food. He didn't eat. He just stared at the door, waiting, and when John was finally wheeled out, Shadow didn't jump or bark. He just walked to him, placed his head gently on John's lap, and closed his eyes. Back home, Shadow became more than a dog. He became John's shadow in the truest sense. Guiding his steps. Protecting his sleep. Guarding him without needing permission. People in town started calling them the silent pair. But those who knew better saw something deeper. Shadow wasn't following John. He was keeping him alive, because some bonds aren't born of affection. They are forged in survival. 2 winters later, John passed away peacefully in his sleep. The town held a small funeral at the base of the mountain. No fanfare. No long speeches. Just snow falling gently over a wooden coffin. Shadow stood still throughout. Not barking. Not crying. Just watching. The next morning, as the town awoke, Shadow was already there, curled beside John's grave, and the next morning. And the next. Through heat waves, thunderstorms, and blizzards, he came. Every single day, the people began calling him the ghost guardian. He didn't eat unless food was placed next to the headstone. He didn't sleep unless it was beneath the pine tree where John used to sit. He didn't play. He didn't run. He waited day after day. Month after month. 1,000 days. Then, on the morning of the 3rd winter, he didn't come. They found him under that same pine tree, eyes closed, still as stone. No sign of struggle. No sound. Just the stillness of a creature who had waited long enough. Shadow was buried next to John, beneath the earth that had held their final years together, and today, in a quiet corner of Montana, stands a small stone with only one line. A shadow never disappears. It just waits for the light to return.